Welcome everyone to Squash BC's semi-annual general meeting, Saturday, January 30th at 10 a.m. Hoping that you all have had a good start to the new year, and I wish you all the best for a brighter and better year ahead. We are still faced with restrictions in BC until February 5th. However, we will provide you with our plans for when restrictions begin to ease. Our goal is to ensure that we are well prepared and have everything in place ready to go when restrictions loosen. So we'll talk more about that in today's meeting. I will turn to the agenda just to cover some aspects or the format of today's meeting. So we'll do a year in review led by Nancy, and then we'll talk about the return to squash update. Bruce Matthews will provide an update on the ranking systems. And then at the end, we'll have a member feedback session. Please stay till this point because we want to get your feedback and input so we can further serve the community as best as possible and answer any questions or any ideas that you may have to help the organization. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer period. So we'll try and, kind of collect the questions and answer them at the end. At that point, you can, raise your hand and you can ask your questions. If along the way that you have questions and you're worried about forgetting them, please click in the chat and enter your questions there, and we'd be more than happy to answer it at the end. And I wanted to mention about staff and some new additions to the team. Nancy will go in detail, but since the last meeting in May of 2020, we've had Rebecca Anton join us over the summer. She's our Member Services and Operations Manager. In December, Josh Hooving joined as Program Coordinator, Seven Carnegie Preston as Bookkeeper, and then we now have Michelle Blanchard, who is a program intern. So I wanted to thank Nancy and the staff for preparing and organizing this meeting so that we can share, what's been going on in the last 6 to 8 months since we last had a general meeting. So I'll turn it over to Nancy now.
Thanks, Natasha. Welcome, everybody. We are very excited to share with you what we've done in our last year. Despite COVID, we've actually been very busy creating new programs and continuing working with some of our existing programs, among other things. So you'll hear more about that as we go forward. I'd like to first start with this organizational chart. You've seen this before. The people in blue are our board. I'd like to introduce them. Natasha Dukas, you've already met her. Bruce Matthews, Cindy Longley, Fahim Gowdry, Leonard Bruno, Rachel Au, and Rory Johnson. We have one board vacancy right now. Steve Hawes stepped down for personal reasons, so we will be looking to fill that at the May AGM. The people in green are our new staff members, and quite a different team, with the exception of myself, from the team that you met in May at our AGM. So Josh, Rebecca, Seven, and Michelle. And I'd also like to introduce Richard Yendel, who is our Squash BC High Performance Coach. Next slide, please. Our zone representatives, very important to our work in the province. The province is broken into 8 zones that is determined by the BC Games. The role of the zone rep is it's a two-way liaison role. It's sharing information about what's going on with Squash BC with individual members and club members, and vice versa, what's going on in that particular zone. We meet on a quarterly basis, and if there are new things that come up, we communicate regularly. I'd like to welcome 2 new zone reps, Nathan Ozog and Tech Fu. So welcome you two. Next slide. So yes, I'd like to introduce our 2021 committees and task forces. Very much thank the chairs and all the members of the committees. We have 2 committees at this particular point that are still in development, junior development. And the reason for that is the focus of the Junior Development Committee in the past has been on junior higher performance. And that responsibility is now included as part of the high performance committee. And the junior development focus now will be more on the grassroots development. So we will be forming that team or that committee once we start playing again. And nominations is formed annually, usually takes about 3 months. And that's a group that nominates the board and committee members for the various committees. So thanks to everyone who participates on Squash BC committees. It's vital to our continued work and being able to allow us to do what we can do. So thanks. Membership, as you can tell from our membership numbers, and not surprising given we're in COVID, our club membership numbers and our individual membership numbers are down. Club membership numbers, primarily the reason that the difference is because many of the recreation centers who are members are not open, unfortunately. And so that makes that difference there. And on the individual side, we're down about 1,000 members. That's a big chunk of members for Squash BC. And obviously, because we're not playing particular league and tournaments, that doesn't drive the membership. Membership is such an important part of our revenue. And that revenue helps us do what we're able to do, pay staff salaries, allows us to continue programming, just to name a few things. There's a lot that's done here. This year we did actually establish a recreational membership, and look forward to seeing that recreational membership grow over time. COVID obviously stopped what we were doing this year, but I think that's going to be an important new membership category for us. Next slide, please. And with that, what I like to introduce Alan Brown. Alan is the chair of the partnership committee, and he's going to speak about the growth initiative and our fundraising campaign. Over to you, Alan.
My name is Alan Brown. I'm the chair of the partnership committee, and I'm going to talk about the growth initiative, which started in 2019, beginning of 2019. Squash BC appointed a committee of 6 people, 5 from Vancouver, 1 from Victoria, and I'm the chair of that committee. Can you turn the page, Josh, please? The committee got going in early 2019. It took about 6 months to plan the growth initiative project before it started getting into a fundraising mode. The purpose of the committee was to assist Squash BC implement the growth initiative, and in particular to be responsible for the raising of the funds that are necessary to support the initiative. Prior to the initiative getting going, there are other associations around the world, squash associations, that have implemented the same kind of initiative. Ontario is a little in front of us, USA, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Our primary objectives at this point are to raise funds over the next 3 to 4 years, what we call the kickstart period, to initiate a selection of new programs which are designed to enhance participation in the game, to reverse the decline in participation, and start growing the number of people playing. Also, the partnership committee, besides being responsible for fundraising in the kickstart period, is also going to be assisting Squash BC to increase its revenue generation in the long term, so that the initiative can be sustained for a long period of time. Thanks, Josh. You could turn the page. So our plans for action are to substantially expand the programs and services that Squash BC delivers, particularly focused on recreational grassroots squash to get the participation up, and also to particularly assist facilities who struggle because they have no or very little in the way of coaching services, and that's about 80% of the facilities in BC. At the moment, Squash BC has a very limited budget, and out of that budget, about $60,000 a year has been spent in recent years for player development, developing the game, trying to grow the game. And of that $60,000, about half comes from the 2020 fund and the Goodwill Fund, so only about 30,000 from Squash BC's own revenues. And that's just not sufficient to have a significant impact. So our objective over the Kickstart period is to ramp that up to around $200,000 a year, or 3 times what is currently spent, and then to continue with that kind of funding for the initiative, after that time. Let me switch to the next slide, please, Josh. So far we started in 2019 with the objective of raising actually $330,000 from individual donors, an additional amount from other sources for a total of $500,000. And the Kickstart period that we're looking at is 2019 to 2023. We actually got going with the fundraising part of the initiative in about August of 2019. And by March of 2020, when of course the pandemic caused us to suspend our efforts, we had raised $212,000, which is pretty remarkable given the small size of our sport. And to put that into perspective, the 2020 fund, which was started quite a few years earlier, took 10 years to reach a $200,000 threshold. So we've managed to do the same in about a 6-month period. So when the pandemic hit, the partnership committee suspended its efforts because it just didn't seem right to be asking people to pay money at that time when they had other concerns. But more recently, starting in about October, we have restarted the fundraising effort on a restricted basis. And since then, we've raised the total that's been committed from $212,000 to about $240,000. Looking at it in hindsight, it's fortunate that we did get started in 2019 because, had it started, say, a year later, it would have been very, very difficult in the pandemic circumstances to even get the initiative off the ground. Can you turn over, please? So I just talked about the Kickstart funding, which is the funding that's being generated to support the initiative for the first 3 to 4 years. At the end of the Kickstart period, the objective is to generate additional revenue, Squash BC to generate additional revenue through sources such as corporate sponsorships, which at the moment are quite small and that needs to be increased. From program fees, fees charged for the new programs which are part of the growth initiative, expanded membership base with hopefully more recreational casual players, and additional grants, partly relating to the fact that Squash BC will be providing services and programs in sort of outside the urban areas where grants are generally more available. So those additional revenue sources would continue to be supported by the Building the Future Fund, which is used already to support the initiative, the 2020 Fund, the Goodwill Fund, and support from the BC Jesters. So that's in the long term. So in terms of the fundraising and the categories of donations that we have established, there are 5 shown on this slide, ranging from supporters, under $1,000, builders, 100 club members, pros and champions. The objective here is to raise money over a period of time, 3 to 4 years. And so we have been encouraging members of the squash community to support the initiative over a period of time. Obviously, one-time donations are accepted, but if they could be extended over a 3-year period, that fits better with the ramping up of the initiative over that kind of period. The 100 Club membership category is one where donors can either pay $100 a month for 36 months, 3 years, or $1,200 a year for 3 years. I would mention that donations are tax creditable, so the actual out-of-pocket cost for donations is roughly 1/2 of the donation amount. And while I have the opportunity, I'd like to invite those of you who are listening to this to support the initiative. At the moment, the focus of the fundraising is being sort of targeted at individuals who have so far been very supportive, but the fundraising will have to become more broad-based, and it's critical that it does, because the initiative is vital to the future of the game and needs to be supported by the community as a whole. So I invite you to do that. Now I'm going to turn this over to Nancy again, who's going to talk about the programs supported by the initiative.
I just wanted to say thanks very much, Alan, for your leadership on this partnership initiative, and to all the members of the partnership committee. We've had tremendous success. Thank you to all of those that contributed. And these monies now allow us to start to really plan and implement our growth initiative. Our growth initiative is our 5-year strategic plan. It began in 2019. And 2 objectives: to grow participation and to support our member facilities who are vital to that participation and the strength of our sport. So with this new funding, we've been able to start to initiate and plan new programs, as well as start to enhance some of our existing programs. So next slide, Josh. One of the first program I'm going to speak about is the post-secondary school program. This is a new post-secondary school program and financially supported by the BC Jesters and the Canadian Jesters. We started the planning on this program about a year ago with some initial discussions with several universities and several clubs to talk about what that program could and should look like, and how Squash BC could contribute to that program. We had a number of pilots planned to actually go out in last spring, and COVID hit and everything stopped. So our first pilot project was, or pilot program was in Kelowna, a partnership with UBC Okanagan and the Global Fitness Sport Club. And it's very exciting. Unfortunately, about half of the program happened, and then COVID hit again, and we had to stop the program. What was exciting about this on a number of fronts, but this program was sold out within 24 hours of being offered at UBCO. So that was great. It shows we're on the right track. For the 3 sessions that the groups, that the students were able to participate in, super feedback on what was happening with that program. We will continue to work with the universities we had been in discussion with to talk about initiating those pilot programs. And those were UBC, UVic, BCIT, and UNBC in Prince George. We're actually hoping to initiate the secondary program in Prince George in this spring, if by chance the restrictions on COVID do ease. And again, thank you for the BC Jesters and the Canadian Jesters for their support of this program. I'd like to now introduce Sean to talk about the Roving Ambassador program.
Thanks, Nancy. So I'm coordinating this program. The idea is to help the facilities that don't have a full-time pro, don't have a strong usage of the squash courts or a strong program currently in place. So right now we're looking at places like the northern part of the island, northern BC, so that Prince Rupert to Prince George corridor, and then looking at the Okanagan right now with the hope to move into the Kootenays. It's really 3 things. We need to have people, we need to have some sort of a structure, and we need some sort of a champion to run that structure. So the goal is to send people out, run a bunch of events with some marketing behind it to get that initial spark, that initial momentum, and identify, if we don't know who they are already, those local champions so we can support them, mentor them in running squash programming, whether it's leagues or lessons as needed, and then having the tools and resources that we're developing that say, hey, when you're trying to run an introductory lesson, this is your goals. Leagues, these are your goals, so that it's a little less reinvention of the wheel each time and more upfront and direct for the people that are probably doing this on a volunteer basis to be effective at the facilities. We're looking at doing the Okanagan and Northern BC in March if COVID restrictions allow. And as I say, hoping to expand as things go on.
I'll jump back in here to discuss the wonderful initiatives that our Women and Girls in Squash Committee has put on. So once again, this fall, we were able to hold Women's Squash Week. Traditionally, this has been a one-week program where the clubs are putting events on within their clubs. This year, with the restrictions in place through COVID, our committee was able to do a complete 180 and turn the event completely virtual. It turned into a 10-week challenge. We were able to hold a number of webinars and courses, as well as provide some other resources. The huge advantage of going virtual was the reach that we were able to get across the province. We also even had some people tune in internationally. So a really great resource that our Women and Girls in Squash Committee was able to put forth this year, given the COVID restrictions that were in place. And another program that this committee runs is the Emerging Female Leaders Program. So in 2020, we were able to offer 2 $500 grants to Jessica from Cheam and Chilliwack Squash Club, as well as Trish from Bayside Squash Club. These grants are offered to Squash BC member clubs who are encouraged to identify female ambassadors within their squash community who are, running programs, finding other ways to encourage participation amongst women and girls in squash. And this year, we have shifted the timelines slightly. So last year in 2020, that nomination period was sort of happening around the January timeframe. This year, because of the COVID restrictions in place and recognizing that a lot of clubs are not currently able to run much, if any, programming, we have decided to push this timeline back. So likely the nomination period will open up in the fall. And we will have more information coming out to the clubs as we progress, as time goes on. But this program is still in place, is still operational. The grants will still be available this year, just shifting the timeline on it there. And before I pass it off, I just wanted to thank our Women and Girls in Squash Committee very much. They're chaired by Shelley Neal. They do a wonderful job supporting the growth of women and girls in the game, and they are looking for new members. So if there's anybody that you're aware of that might be interested, by all means, please reach out. And also a quick thank you to our sponsors of the Women and Girls in Squash program, Sport BC, Promotion Plus, and Buntain Insurance, who are huge supporters of these programs.
Thanks, Rebecca. Terrific. Our Junior Pathways program, this is an existing program. It's been in existence since 2016. And up until this year, we've been able to continue to grow in participation numbers, the number of clubs hosting events, and the zones that those events are taking place in. The program includes 4 phases or 4 stages: fundamental, developing, progressive, and competitive. We had a number of pathway events planned last spring. Unfortunately, we keep hearing this, COVID, everything stopped. Rosters was able to start a program this fall. It was interrupted, but they had super participation in the program and look forward to continuing with it once the restrictions are left. I do want to say that if you, we do have funds in this program, so we look forward to receiving applications for pathway events as soon as the restrictions are eased. And these events can continue throughout the summer, so spring, summer into the fall. So look at our website or contact our office and we'll give you more information about the Pathways program. Next slide. Tools and resources. We've talked about this in a variety of ways, and you're going to see it again mentioned later on. It's an important strategy for Squash BC to help support growth and to help support our clubs. We started this process with one-on-one interviews and have conducted 18 so far with clubs around the province. We still have lots more to do. What the interviews provided us was the feedback of what clubs would like to see. The interviews did include what do clubs need while we're in COVID, coming out of COVID, and then beyond. But what types of tools and resources do each of the clubs need or see? And the priorities, and this helps us establish the priorities that we're going to develop these tools and resources. So far, the Roving Ambassador Program was always something we had talked about. That certainly is a high priority for many clubs, as Sean said, particularly clubs that don't have full-time coaches. We've talked about clubs, the need for membership marketing tools, messaging, that type of thing. And for, again, clubs who don't have pros or working with volunteers primarily, things like lesson plans, how-to kits, that sort of thing. So we're in the midst of developing some of these materials. We have some developed, and then determining how we're going to present the materials and where we're going to house them so that the clubs and individuals can access these materials. So that will, we should have that work done in the next little while, and we'll let everybody know where and when it is. But definitely in the next month or two, we'll start to produce some of these materials and share them with you. Next slide, please. I'm turning it over to Josh now to talk about high performance.
So in 2019, our high performance program got a grant from VS Sport to review and revamp our program. A team led by Andrew Mount was conducted to review and make suggestions of improving our program. This led to our program being more in line with Squash Canada's high performance standards and VS Sports Program of Excellence criteria. The program has replaced the previous high performance squads with a series of 4 statuses depending on age and development level. As Nancy announced prior, Richard Yandel has been appointed as the provincial high performance coach for our program and has been hard at work for the 2021 season. We've initially announced 28 athletes to our high performance program. This is composed of just junior, elite, and high performance status athletes. We have plans to announce our senior, elite, and or development status athletes in the coming months once restrictions allow us to do so.
Terrific. Yeah, thanks, Josh. For more information on the high performance program, you can check out our website under Playing Squash and High Performance. There's information on the program there, and also a webinar that we hosted for all of the high performance juniors and others. So that's there if you want to have a look at that. The next, I'm going to talk about coaching, and under the leadership, and we've actually done quite a bit on coaching these past several months. So under the leadership of Cindy Longley, our board member responsible for coaching and officiating, our first priority was understanding who are our current active coaches in the province, their level of certification, and where they live. That then helped us identify where are our strengths and where are our gaps. We did the same in terms of those individuals who can teach lead coaching certification courses, again, to understand strengths and weaknesses. And this is an important step for us to develop the strategies that we need to build a strong coaching program in the province. The other work that we've been doing, we were lucky this year, well, not lucky, we worked hard and we applied for 3 grants, coaching grants in Northern BC. That was the place that they were available. We received all 3. We were able to host a coaching clinic in Prince Rupert in November, led by Ben Uliana and assisted by Michael Thompson. And during that clinic, we actually piloted a new Squash Canada coaching course called the Community Coaching Course. It's not certification level. You get certified as a trainer or trained. And really positive feedback for that course, which very much helps Squash Canada and helps us. And I think that type of course is going to really help us train more people in coaching across the province. We then applied for another grant and received it, and to do the same thing in Prince George. So as soon as restrictions ease, we'll be hosting that program. Ben will be leading that again. And we also got another grant to go back to Prince Rupert and follow up on what we learned from that first the community coaches course, because there were some things that great feedback from the people that participated. And you know, some of the things they felt they still needed before they were comfortable coaching. So we now have developed a program to help shore up that. So that's our coaching. And on the I've done that one already. On the officiating side, we haven't been as active as the coaching this year, but we have run several clinics. So rules clinics, the first being the virtual clinic that was held during Women's Squash Week, or the 10-week challenge. There have also been several singles and doubles officiating clinics hosted by Squash Canada, and we've been relaying that information to our members, you know, via the newsletter and on our website, and we'll continue to do that. There seems to be quite a bit of activity on the webinar side of things, so watch for those. And the new Squash Canada rule is something that we should all be aware of. We do have some time, but not much, is that all athletes competing in Canadian championships must be certified at a minimum club level or referee level. So that's something quite new. And we'll be working and offering more of those coaches, or encouraging people to take that coach or that level. Terrific, thanks. So Josh, back to you.
So our CORDA FSC task force is composed of 7 individuals that are current or past board members or staff members. It's a team led by Alan Brown. We're currently wrapping up phase 1 of the project, which consists of reviewing other organizations and our current documents to see any tools or resources that can be used to help grow and maintain facilities across the province. We've done extensive research and categorized them into these 9 categories as seen on the screen. And we're identifying facilities across the province that are at risk of losing the facility. We're nearing the completion of phase 1, which will be moving to phase 2, hopefully in the next week or 2. And we're going to be analyzing the data that we've collected from the other organizations in our past history, and using that to make clear data and information forms for the members to use. We're also advocating for the courts that we've identified at risk of losing their facilities, and we're also advocating to build new squash courts across the province.
Terrific. Thanks, Josh. This has been a very active committee, and it's a huge body of work that's being undertaken here. So thank you all. Just in closing our year in review, I wanted to again show you our 2020 Squash BC Award recipients. Alan Brown, Sean Zerkowski, Lucia Bicknell, Lauren Wagner, Stuart Dixon, and Jimmy Vallier. So congratulations to all of you. Our next, that finishes our year in review. As you can see, I mean, there's been a lot of activity, despite the fact that we haven't been able to compete. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the return to squash and our update. At this point, I wish I could share new news with you, but I can't. We're still in the same place that we have been since November. And there is a new Public Health Authority announcement order expected on February 5th. So that's next Friday. So hoping that that things ease up, but not sure that they will. It's been very quiet on the and very little speculation about what will happen on February 5th within the sport world. Via Sport, we do know that Via Sport, who's designated by the provincial government as the body responsible for sport, has been working on what they're calling a phase 2.5, which is a return to sport plan in between where we are now and where we were in the summer. And it hasn't been released yet. So I have no new news on that. And we don't know when it'll be released, although it would likely coincide with the easement of restrictions when that happens. So more as of February 5th, what we'll do is, as you know, we hear the announcement as you do from the Public Health Authority, then Via Sport helps all of the sport organizations translate that information as how it relates to sport, because it isn't quite often all that obvious. And as soon as we know, we'll relay that to you as club members and you as individuals. So I'd like to thank the Return to Squash Task Force. They've done a tremendous amount of work putting together our Return to Squash plan, and then the numerous revisions on that plan that have been made, you know, as changes are announced by the Public Health Authority. So great work with that group. And I'd also like to thank Karen Levine for her leadership with the task force and working with me on this Return to Squash plan. I'm sure there'll be questions about that, but we'll leave those to the end. So I wish I had more news, but no, timing of this meeting wasn't quite perfect, but you'll hear lots more from us. I'd now like to introduce Bruce Matthews to talk about the alignment and progression of the digital platforms. Bruce?
Thank you, Nancy. This is also, this information is also wrapped around sort of ratings and rankings, but it's a much bigger issue. And as such, there was a task force over 2020 that sort of tried to unpack all this. So the important decision to align Squash BC to Squash Canada's ratings system has now been made. We've been the beneficiary in BC of having a relatively advanced digital progression in terms of supporting the sport of squash. That wasn't shared by all provinces and territories in Canada. So when Squash Canada made their decision recently to invest in a much broader national system, the other provinces were in a much better position to advance their capabilities. We took a very measured approach here in Squash BC because we had the benefit of good support, good functionality that we'd developed over the years, and have had a very beneficial relationship with Sporty HQ to build those capabilities. And our membership, we felt, was well served by that. But the decision came where aligning to the national platform and the consistencies and challenges with ensuring accuracy across the country became paramount for both recreational and particularly competitive players. So we made this decision late in 2020. What this means then is that individual members of Squash BC will now be part of a standardized rating system across Canada. And that system is also compatible with other international federations around the world. This will require a move, so this will affect us all, from individual members to club members. So there will be an impact in our activities, and we would like to have this undertaken, a transition undertaken in preparation for next squash season in the 2021-22 season. And we will fall under the Squash Canada umbrella, if you will, in terms of this contractual structure. And we will be the beneficiary of all the functionality that comes with these digital platforms, which with the evolution of these online systems becomes, quite comprehensive, all the way from ratings and rankings to online payments, tournament management, membership support, etc., communications. So these are pervasive systems that help enable our sport. And for those of you who are not familiar, Club Locker is offered as an all-in-one rankings, tournament, and reservation system. And it's used by a number of federations around the world, including US Squash, England Squash, and most recently Squash Canada. Can you flip to the next Thank you. Thank you, Josh. So what can we expect going forward? We will go through a migration process. So that will, once that's complete, then individual playing members and club members will have access to this system. There will be some differences from how we're currently managing information within the Sporty HQ platform. But I think at a broad level, these are both very comprehensive, good systems. So the material differences, I think, will be minimal. But we will see differences in the specific ways we access things and process information. Club members specifically will also, as a result of the structural relationship that Squash Canada has with the Club Locker platform, will have access to all the suite of services that the club management tools are provided within that system, and clubs can use those at their discretion. And then the other important thing that we need to embark on as an organization and community is a transition project. And so that work is underway. It's being led by a group of volunteers and folks within the organization, and we'll be reaching out for support on this. But we would like to sort of implement this in the March to June timeframe, and that will help migrate the information, the data over into the system, and then the appropriate training and support and communication to support the members in use of this system for next year. And then I would like to close things here with a couple shout outs. First of all, I'd like to thank Sporty HQ. They've been a great partner for Squash BC and have provided a lot of both functional and financial support over the last 5 years to help move things forward, and we've been well served by that. I'd also like to thank the task force that participated in this. We worked on this probably for the better part of 10 months, talked to many provincial organizations, Squash Canada, clubs, and others in order to make sure we understood the implications and of how these systems will affect stakeholders going forward. And then I'd also like to thank the office, the Squash BC office, for their patience as we've been going through this and assessing these decisions, because these tools really do provide a significant enablement functionality and efficiency tool for the organization. So they're a huge stakeholder in how we use these systems. Back to you, Nancy.
Great. Thanks very much, Bruce. Thank you. Okay, so now it's time for the next section of our agenda. And our focus continues to be return to squash. This is the most important thing that I believe our organization is doing and can be doing over the next several months and years. It's not going to be a quick return. So at this point, what we're planning on doing is breaking into 4 groups. You've already been assigned to a breakout room, either as a club rep, coach, or as individuals. Each group will have a lead who will facilitate the discussion and take notes. Those notes, so in that we'll talk probably for about 10 minutes and gather that feedback. The question that we are asking is, what barriers do you foresee or concerns do you have around a return to squash post-COVID? I think there's going to be lots of discussion, lots of good thinking here. How we're going to use this information, so we'll compile the information. Unfortunately, we can't come back into one group and show everybody what the 4 different groups did. It's possible, but very time consuming. So what we're going to do is we're going to compile the information and we will put it with our meeting notes from this session, along with this PowerPoint presentation and the webinar. So that should be out in the next couple of days for you. So with that, I'm just trying to think if I have to do anything else other than allow Rebecca to take over the system and assign us to our various groups.
Thanks, Nancy. So yeah, as Nancy mentioned, I've put you all into groups as best as I could based on your role. Some of you I may have shifted slightly just to try to have some even groups. So if you're not in the group that you kind of thought you would be, still please participate. Your feedback is still valid in your group. So I'll break everybody out. It'll sort of take a second and I'll tell you you're going to a breakout room. We'll be there for about 10 minutes and I'll give everybody a minute warning before we're going to kind of come back together so you can close your discussion. So here we go.
Oh, I just had a great session, actually, lots of input, and I hope that everybody else had enough time to provide more input and all their input. If there is more feedback and you want to continue the conversation, you know, notify us at the office, send an email to the Squash BC office, and you know, we want to hear back from you. These are great, great input. We always want to hear from our community and know how we can serve the community better. Right? So as Nancy mentions, is that we'll be sharing what feedback we have. I think I had 2 pages on my group, just from me. And, you know, thanks, Andrew. You mentioned great idea and terrific discussion, and we want to continue that discussion. So I'm going to move on to Q&A. And before we get into Q&A, I just want to do some thank yous. Thank you, Nancy, for leading the team, putting all this together for today. I think it was very insightful to see what has been going on in the office, the advancements in this programming, how we're trying to serve the community, getting ready to serve the community on the courts when, you know, we're able to get back on there. So thank you to you. Great job. You know, this is fantastic. I don't see this too much in other sports right now in terms of how they're progressing. So kudos to you and to the team. Rebecca, just you've been, you know, having to learn on the fly, remotely, virtually for the past, you know, several months. And it's just been great to see, you know, the work that you've put in. Josh, Seven, you know, happy to have you on board. You're recently joined. And, you know, I think we can all see that in a sport organization, it's community, a lot of work together, building the future of a sport and continuing to engage and so forth. So it's fabulous. Michelle, we're excited to have you on board and to work with us and for us to learn from you and you to learn from us. So we're excited for that. I also wanted to thank our speakers today. Alan Brown, thank you for providing that information in terms of the fundraising committee, how that's been going, the progress. Thank you to everybody who has been contributing your time in financially as well. This is all building the programs that are serving the community and that will actually get us engaged very quickly when we are able to start play. Sean, thank you for explaining the Roving Ambassador Program. I think every time I hear about it, it's great, and seeing the progress that's going on there and the programs that we're supporting. Bruce, thank you for explaining those details on the Club Locker tool. You know, the decisions haven't been made lightly. We've really thought hard through the process and how can we just improve, again, the services and offering to our community and to our organization and streamlining the process. And a big shout out to Sporty HQ again for that partnership. We continue to partner with them in other aspects as well. So we continue the conversation with them. And I want to thank the board. So Bruce Matthews, Leonard Bruno, Fahim Guadri, Rachel Au, Rory Johnston, Cindy Longley, thank you for, you know, your dedication to, you know, keep on our meetings, the discussions, the oversight, and the governance as, you know, we look at building through, getting through COVID and putting this organization in a great position to serve our community. So I will stop there, and I appreciate everybody coming on today, and we want to hear any questions from you that we can answer now.
I've got a question for Bruce Matthews. It's Brian Covington. Bruce, with the conversion over to Club Locker, I know I've already joined on Club Locker through various national doubles tournaments, etc. Will there be a double check on people transitioning over to Club Locker that they're already, some people may already be on Club Locker, or do you check that, or what?
Brian, that's a great question. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
There will be, in fact, even in today's environment, we have like a Club Locker affiliation, if you will, through Squash Canada in terms of our existing sharing of information, because we still are part of Squash Canada, and we do a data migration from our current platform into that system.
Okay.
But as part of the transition project, there will be a more formal and aligned and integrated and quality assurance process to because we will now become central within that ratings platform. And then from a Squash BC perspective, once we're on that platform, then we can make whatever adjustments that are necessary to support our community in terms of how we use that platform within the national framework.
Okay, good. Thank you, Bruce.
Bruce, is there going to be an opportunity for us as independent clubs to reach out to you to go through those questions and answers that we may have about transitioning over to Club Locker?
Yes. Yeah, Rob, that's an important part of the transition plan, because ultimately what we're trying to do is provide tools and services that our members can benefit from. And as we go through that, you'll be able to make decisions or assessments on how you can use those tools within the framework that we will be enabling.
Nice, thank you.
Rebecca, were there questions I thought I saw in the chat room earlier that may or may not be there now? I know Giselle asked a question about officiating, and is there a time frame that people who are certified, their officiating runs out? Let me answer that. The answer is no. It doesn't. It doesn't run out. We have a record of everybody who has taken the various levels of certification through Squash Canada's officiating program.
That was the only question in there, Nancy.
Okay.
In the absence of a question at this point, I also did want to do a general thank you to all of you in the community who volunteer your time to support the organizations. All sport organizations require that, and squash is no different. And it's a key. I think it's a key attribute, particularly in our community, that makes our sport successful. So thank you all for contributing your time, your money to the group.
I got a quick question. Has there been any discussion about reaching out to potential influencers on social media, people who have, let's say, 100,000, 1 million users, people who have just a ton of influence within the general community to work with clubs and work with Squash BC to potentially provide these people with a week or two membership and getting them and providing them with a coaching session and getting them introduced to the game and recording that process on their YouTube channel, so on and so forth, to get the game out there and relative to a younger audience and something that a way in which we can introduce the game of squash to many people who don't know it exists, because unless you're part of the 0.005% of Canadians that know what squash is, generally most people don't know what this game is.
That's a really good suggestion.
Yes, really good.
Are you
Yeah.
volunteering, Rob, to help out there?
I'm volunteering to help out in those regards. I don't have a whole lot of time. I am very focused on the promotion of squash, but I'm focused on the promotion of squash in slightly different ways, but I'm very willing to help out. Yes.
Well, we
Terrific.
can bring your 1 million users into the fold, your followers. I mean. It's a great idea. And there's been some recent articles that I've seen that have suggested that theme. And I think it's a very effective way to for our organization to consider.
There's one more question that came into the chat here, Nancy. Are there any urban squash initiatives in the province, either pre-COVID or being planned for the future?
There aren't any at this particular time. There was several years ago under Sue Wasty's leadership before she left for England. It's something that it's certainly sitting there and something that we should be thinking about. And it's just off on a corner right now. I think it's an important initiative. Right now, our priorities are it is around growing participation. I think we really have to focus on getting back our return to squash, like some of the fundamentals to get back and keep our sport strong. And this is something we can add as we are feeling that we're more along that line, or more further on that one. The nice thing about that initiative, the Urban Squash Initiative, is there is models for it, so we don't have to build something from scratch. So that's fantastic. It'll make the task and the work easier.
And another comment that's just come into the chat here as well. Not sure how feasible this idea might be, but connecting with BC School Sport could connect squash with thousands of students and get them engaged through the school system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good thought.
Are there any other questions?
No other questions in the chat box.
No questions, but Heather from Vancouver Lawn here. I just want to say thank you to the board and the Squash BC office. It's been amazing, your communication through this process. And you really don't have a lot of news to share sometimes, but you always keep in really good touch with us, really supportive, and the amount of work you've done when squash has basically kind of come to a halt has been really, really impressive, and definitely the best PSO that I've worked with in the last number of years for sure. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Heather. We really appreciate hearing that. It's great. It's been a great year for communication, because of COVID, and we seem to have communicated a lot more with clubs and with individuals. And I'm certainly getting a lot more inquiries from squash facilities who haven't traditionally, been part of Squash BC. So that's exciting to be able to connect with them and let them know what the services and programs that we have are.
If nobody else has any more questions, I'd like to pipe in with one more. One more. I have got a list, and Nancy, if you're willing to sit down, I've got a bunch of lists of different things that can be done to help squash on its way. Another one of those things, in line with the last comment I had made, was, would Squash BC be interested in creating its own YouTube channel? Because I think if we are going to reach out to other people, especially younger people, they're going to want to see stories. And it would be really interesting to, pick a member from each club, a member who is, younger, but has a really interesting story about their life and how they were introduced to squash and what they're doing now in the squash community. They're playing league, or they're playing, doing a bunch of things that might be of interest, because young people are looking for community, and they're looking for real stories. And if Squash BC created these little vignettes of stories of squash throughout the province, that might add a little bit of relativity to many of these young people who are thinking about taking up the sport.
Good thought, Rob. We'll set a call with yourself, Rebecca, and I to start to explore some of these ideas. I know you've got great ideas on this, and they can be really helpful as we go forward to continue to build the sport and bring people back to the sport.
Great, thanks.
Excellent. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, thank you for the input today. Thank you for your engagement. We appreciate it. And I'll give you back a 1 minute in your day. But have a great day, great rest of your weekend. And we'll look forward to communicating with you, sharing the details from today in the breakout session. And we want to hear more from you. So, keep the conversation going. And we'll continue from here. So all the best and have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
everyone.
you joining us.
Bye now.
I know.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.